Welcome back to Withdraw Consent. Today we have part 18 of the Holocaust series about Dr. Mengele. Now, if you want to go look at past episodes, they're all going to be linked below, but you can always go back to episode 1 of the series on whatever platform you're on, and I put the links to the newest episodes on there, so that one's always full. Now, let me tell you why we're going to talk about this. Basically, Candace Owens came out and said that it was ridiculous. We're going to look at that clip, and the Dr. Mengele stuff, and I didn't cover it. She got banned from Australia, New Zealand. I didn't cover it. And then Eric Hunt did a mini documentary on it. Still didn't cover it because the problem is the claims are so absurd that it doesn't even bother our attention until I saw this. It was the other day ago on Piers Morgan Uncensored, and basically they brought on 3 different conservatives to talk about something going on with the 12-day war, some aspect of that, or the nuclear. I don't remember exactly what the topic was. And he wanted to present 3 different types of conservative views. Candace Owens was the first one to go. And, she just talked about her views, nothing about Dr. Mengele, of course. And then there were 2 after him. I think it was Beck from The Blaze, who, when they were talking at the very beginning, so these are just one-on-one conversations, it's not the panel, and he's just talking to Piers, and he's like, yeah, man, I really just don't know what happened to Candace. I mean, just denying the Dr. Mengele stuff, and I was just blown away. This is a thing people are claiming. This is a thing because it's so absurd that I don't even need to cover it. But if it's something where Beck is using this as a point, because there's tons of different things you could talk about Candace. You could be like, man, Candace, I mean, thinking that Brigitte Macron has a penis, you know what I mean? Man, she's just way off there. And if you haven't watched her whole series on that, that sounds like a crazy claim. She must be like a kooky conspiracist or something. But the Dr. Mengele one there's just no evidence for it is the problem, And so basically we're going to look at this, and then I got 3 clips I'm going to show you. First, I'm going to show you the clip of Candace, what she said, how crazy offensive it is. Here it is.
They experimented on twins. I mean, some of the stories, by the way, sound completely absurd. I mean, the idea that they just cut a human up and then sewed them back together. Why would you do that? Literally, even if you're the most evil person in the world, that's a tremendous waste of time and supplies. Just slice a person in half and sew them together. That just sounds like bizarre propaganda.
Okay, so that's reasonable that any human being would think along those lines. Because the claims are so incredulous. Let's get to what the claims are. Basically, there's no physical evidence, okay? There's this paper they show you. I put it in the thumbnail. I'll put it up on the screen now, but it's cotton swab testing for disease. This is hugely incriminating evidence. And so there's no physical evidence that anything happened with this guy, except that he just did his job and took care of people. As a matter of fact, a common theme going through all the eyewitnesses is that whenever people were lucky enough, twins, to have Dr. Mengele come study you, because he would watch on the near the trains arriving looking for twins because he wanted to study them. And when you're going, I don't know what class I was in, but it was covering a lot of stuff about how important the Nazi studies on twins were, and they thought that they were human rights issues, but then 50 years later they started resuming the studies and verifying the exact same things that the Nazis did because there was nothing wrong with the studies. It just had people looked at it like, ooh, what are you doing? Eugenics? Well, actually, that would be a great field of science to advance. So anyways, basically, everybody said that he would then treat the twins really nice. They would have the nicest clothes in the camp. They would get sweets. He would be very nice to them. And then what you have some Jewish eyewitnesses all just making up stories. And the problem is when you get to making up Holocaust stories, the stories have to be bigger than the previous person's story. So there's a guy who literally says that at Auschwitz, there was a pile of ashes the size of a real mountain. He'll tell you that. Or we were just talking about this last week, the guy who wrote the book and that Eric Hunt was talking about, and he, walks to the edge of this burning, they're just making stuff up. And the problem with that is that, number one, it's so ridiculous that on its face, you look at it and you're like, it's not true. And the problem is if things really were happening, you discredit that fact because of your incredulous statements you're making. So basically, we're going to look at this lady, Vera Alexander, and we're going to look at her statement. So the first one's going to be during the Eichmann trial. Now, we covered Adolf Eichmann and his whole trial where he's kidnapped, taken to Israel. I'll put a link to that below if you haven't seen that one. That's not in the Holocaust areas. And so let's look at this link right now of her testifying in front of this trial.
Attorney General, do you remember Dr. Mengele, the notorious Dr. Mengele?
To my regret, I remember him well.
We have heard about him, but we have not heard one thing about him. Do you remember the experiments which he conducted with people, inmates?
I saw only one experiment.
What did you see?
There were two children, twins, gypsy children. They took them from the block I was in. This was the camp of the gypsies. And a few days later, they were brought back, stitched up together. Their hands, the veins of their hands were stitched together, of the two children, and in their back.
President of Court, I did not understand this. Attorney General, he stitched them together, President of Court. He stitched the veins together. He made them to be Siamese twins.
He sewed together the hands of the children. It was full.
Attorney General, and they did not live much longer. Is that it?
Okay, so that trial took place in 1961, so that's basically an early version of her story. And then I'm going to play for you a later version. She's obviously much older in this clip. Here's another version of this ridiculous story.
Came every day, brought chocolate for them, the most beautiful clothes, white pantaloons, white even aprons, and the girls had ribbons in the hair. One day he shouted on me. He told, because one ribbon was lower than the other one, told me, "How do you do it? They are not like I like them." Then one day came a assessment and they took the children away. They were my pets, Tito and Nina. One of them was a hunchback. I don't remember exactly, 2 or 3 days after, another assessment brought them back in a terrible state. They were cutted. The boy or the girl, the hunchback, was sewn to the other one, back to back. The wrist, back to back. It was a terrible smell also, already, gangrene. The cuttings were dirty, and the children did cry day and night.
Okay, so you got no physical evidence that this happened, and you just have these people telling these ridiculous stories. And which is basically just what Candace said. They're ridiculous stories on their face, which is the argument against Mengele. In order to believe that Mengele was this crazy guy, you just have to believe this testimony of these Jewish eyewitnesses. The problem is, and we've discussed this before, is that they're flamboyant, ridiculous claims. So they're hard to believe. And you're also talking about the most unreliable people in the world as far as testimony goes. We talked about this literally in the last episode, Kol Nidre. They have an oath they take every year, a prayer they do that absolves them of a year of future oaths. These people cannot testify in court in any country in the world because their testimony can't be credible. You could ask them, "Hey, I mean, are you of Jewish faith?" And they say yes. And do the prayer of Kol Nidre on the eve of Yom Kippur? And they say no. And you say, "Your Honor, I just want to throw the testimony out." Because even if they did do the prayer, they would be lying about it, and there's absolutely no credibility here. Now, this doesn't apply to somebody who's not of the Jewish faith, but who was Jewish. I'm not making that claim. It's people of the Jewish faith. Regardless, it could be a white person, black person, brown person, all the Europeans that changed their name to become prime ministers of Israel, whatever. Okay, so real quick, I'm going to give a couple more facts about this before I close it up. I got a couple of references below if you want to look into this more yourself. I put the USHMM article on Mengele there if you want to read more about him. And I put the link to a PDF that is called The Trial That Never Happened, Joseph Mengele and the Twins of Auschwitz. They basically put him on trial, even though he wasn't there to defend himself, and just whatever everybody said was the truth, you know? I also, when I was doing this, I took notes on, so I'm just not going to go into it for like 20 minutes, but let me tell you what the notes, what I found out. Basically, he was doing studies to find out genetically how to make more twins, right? If that was the case, sewing people together would have nothing to do with anything. There was tons of oversight based on what I saw of what he was doing. And then there was no actual evidence presented, which I've said for only Jewish eyewitnesses. They took tons of pictures of him measuring and studying kids. Like, you could just Google this and see a bunch of pictures. Maybe I'll put a couple up on the screen. But I mean, if they're being this transparent, I just wouldn't be doing that if they were doing. Okay, there was a claim that 2 sisters were going to have to copulate with 2 Polish twins. Then they were going to kill all of them and test the babies. So none of that actually happened by the witness's own account. So the claim is that the Germans were going to make them copulate with the 2 Polish twins and then kill them all and test their babies. Now, of course, this claim is complete nonsense, because even if that was their thing, they were going to force these girls to copulate with the boys, which would make the Nazis guilty of the rape, because it would be non-consensual, I'm assuming, you know. But then you wouldn't tell them you're going to kill them all and test the babies. That's just a lie. Even if they were going to kill them all, you wouldn't say that. You were saying, oh, well, you can test your babies, you know what I mean? And then get them afterwards, you know what I mean? But this is ridiculous. Okay. Yeah, they made the claims of putting dye in the brown-eyed, blonde-haired kids. And Eric went through this. I forget exactly, but it was they were actually doing testing to try to get rid of some genetic disease that was fatal. Something. So that's ridiculous. And then also, okay. Everybody said that he was really nice, but he also, Dr. Mengele, had a sick child in Germany, and one of the Jewish eyewitnesses says she hoped that the child would die so that he would feel bad for the prisoners. So that's the kind of people we get testifying. Real great people, right? Now, I want to talk about one more thing here that's kind of related, but it's not Dr. Mengele. It's about the research that the Germans did during this period of National Socialism. And I was talking to a scientist, and she was telling me that when you go to medical school, there's a lot of stuff about the brain that we only know because of Nazi scientists, you know? And that's what they claim, so I don't know if that's true. But assuming that's true, I asked her, why does it all come from the Nazis? And she says, because they were doing unethical experiments. How so? Like how so? Like doing stuff like taking off the skull cap and then removing parts of the brain and see what happens with functionality and stuff. And then if it's pain related, like you're trying to figure out something about the brain and pain, then there's no anesthesia. But if it's not pain related, you could do anesthesia and they won't feel anything. And you basically kill them in the process. And another guy sitting there listening to the conversation, he said, I don't see anything wrong with that. He said, if the person is say you're going to be executed anyways, capital punishment for whatever you did, why aren't we doing that in America? Like, why aren't we giving these people to science? Like you maybe you took somebody's life, or 3 or 4, and now we're going to take your life. You're going to contribute something. That was his point of view. The scientist I was talking to, she disagreed that was moral. We can all agree that if this was being done to children, then that would be immoral, no matter what, because you just can't do this stuff to children. As to whether or not you agree that somebody capital punishment, last appeal has been made, you're about to flip the switch, stick the needle in, whatever, and instead you do this is a gray area. And so if the Germans were doing that, then that would be a gray area where you would have to make your own. But it's clearly not just doing terrible stuff to massive groups of population. And none of this has to do with Mengele, but this is just a related subject of the Nazi medical stuff that they did. Anyways, if you want to see more about this, I'm going to link Eric Hunt's newest documentary that he's working on below. If you want to spend some more time looking at different clips and stuff, I'm just play you a minimum here to kind of just show you what we got, and then you can make your own decision. I also think that, for goodness sakes, people like Glenn Beck making that statement, Piers Morgan. It's funny because Piers Morgan doesn't even call him on it. Well, he stays neutral because it's such a divisive issue, I guess. But like, who watches Glenn Beck nowadays? Well, Zionists, I guess. And he's not Jewish. I looked it up. He's not Jewish. But anyways, that's what I got for you. I thought it was necessary to do because of what Glenn Beck said. And of course, Australia and New Zealand banning her and the free speech implications. And it's so funny that you... I mean, she said a lot of stuff about World War II. There's other things you could go after that are more credible that she said that you would have more credibility in attacking her on. You have no credibility in attacking others because it's such a ridiculous subject. Unless you believe these Jewish eyewitnesses about these fantastical things. In which case, I mean, I got a bridge to sell you. Anyways, that's what I got for you. Hope you guys have a great weekend. Hope to see you next week.